And welcome to the first episode of Turbocharged by SASE, Network Transformation in 2021. This will be a six-part series where we'll be taking a deep dive into SASE and how it can transform digital businesses. In this first episode, we'll be sharing what's behind the meteoric rise of SASE and what is essential for the modern business to know about a converged, cloud-delivered security platform. I'm John Burke, CTO at Nemertes. Today, I'm going to be joined by Yishay Yavel, CMO at Cato Networks. For those of you who are not familiar with Nemertes, we are a research and strategic advisory firm that's focused on finding the business value that businesses derive by deploying emerging technologies. And we've been following the cloud security and cloud networking space since its inception and are happy to be diving deeply into the world of SASE as it's driving some significant transformational possibilities for our clients and for the people that we interview for our research. And now I'll ask Yishay to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about Cato.
Hello, John. Thank you. Great to be here. I'm the marketing head for Cato. I've been with the company since day one, so I've seen our platform evolve to fulfill the vision of SASE, as we will discuss today. And Cato is a pure play SASE platform, and we will talk about the value of SASE in general, a little bit about Cato in particular in this webinar today.
That's great. Thanks very much. And to have the conversation we want to have, we're going to have to start by defining terms. So how would you define SASE in 2021?
So let's take a look at the kind of the first diagram that kind of I brought along. Great for having it. So for the way we think about SASE is a converged global cloud-based architecture that serves all users. This is kind of a long way to say that the main new thing about SASE is its architecture. So if you look at the different features that come with SASE, like SD-WAN, like firewall as a service, secure web gateways, the list is long. All of them are well-known, well-defined capabilities that have been with us for a very long time. So what is new? What's new here is the platform. It's the way those features are delivered to customers and how customers consume these features. So at the heart of SASE, there is a cloud service that delivers all these capabilities in this cloud-first architecture. The second element of SASE is the on-ramps. We basically want to connect the different enterprise resources, the branches, the data centers, the people, the cloud data centers and applications. We want to plug them into the SASE cloud. And the benefit of this is that everybody gets the same set of capabilities no matter where they are. So you can be in the branch behind an SD-WAN device, connect to the SASE cloud and get benefits of secure and optimal access to any application, or you can be a user on a mobile device plugging into the SASE cloud and get the same benefits. Right? So this is this notion of equal weighting or deploying the same capabilities everywhere in a consistent way. This is the real story behind SASE, which makes it different than the current approaches that are more edge-oriented, and we'll maybe talk more about it later. So this is how I would define SASE, is this new architecture for delivering networking and security capabilities everywhere.
Thank you. And from our perspective on the research side, what we see is so transformational is that unification of the policy environment, so that you're not having to have policies defined in 8 different tools to try and effect consistent security across all these contexts. Now, the term SASE was made popular back in 2019. The concept had been building towards that unified concept for a little while before that. We conducted research in late 2020 and found that more than a third of organizations, so about 37%, said they had begun to deploy SASE, and another 40% planned to do so by the end of 2022. Now, because there's so many functional components and people don't always do everything at once, we make some allowances for folks, deploying a SASE solution, but just as a CASB at first and then expanding out from that. But making those allowances, do you see this prediction coming true, that many people adopting these kinds of platforms?
So we do, but we believe that the starting point is a bit different. We think the starting point is always in the network and not in the security. So what is driving the SD-WAN evolution is MPLS replacement or augmentation, which means that the network itself changes from being this data center centric, east-west, backhauling. This is the traditional MPLS design, where all traffic was flowing to the data center. Now it's more internet-bound, cloud-bound, kind of going from the branch directly to the cloud services instead of going first to a data center. And then, of course, driving security requirements to accommodate this change. So the customers basically have a certain setup today. They have a network today, they have security today, it's all there. But once they start to change the network, they need new security capabilities, for example, that are cloud delivered. So SASE starts, in our view, with kind of an SD-WAN project, but as customers think about it, what they need is not just to replace MPLS with 2 internet links. They see security requirements, global requirements, remote access requirements, and suddenly SD-WAN is too narrow, and SASE seems to be a more holistic approach to deliver all of these requirements gradually. So I think network transformation first, security transformation next. This is kind of the order we see it in the market.
And I think we'll throw a poll question up at this point and ask folks who are with us on the session today, what WAN transformation requirements are critical for their businesses? So folks, you'll see a poll come up. Do please answer it, and we'll try and come back with results a little later on in the session. So you think SD-WAN is going to be the main on-ramp to SASE for most folks, and certainly we've been tracking the rise of SD-WAN since before the term existed, and we have seen about 2/3 of organizations at this point say they've begun their transformation to an SD-WAN. SASE is considerably more than that. So why undertake a change that significant? What aren't current networks providing that this kind of solution will?
So the thing is that it's really more, you may have all the checkboxes ticked, but over the last 10 years, because the requirements changed, we got cloud in, we got remote access, zero trust network access in. Some organizations went global, expanded, they needed suddenly a backbone or some way to more efficiently connect locations that are far apart. And the way IT responds when there is a new requirement is they go to the market, find a new solution. So you have cloud security and cloud acceleration and global backbone, obviously SD-WAN to address the MPLS shortcomings, and the solutions start to pile up. And at some point, the complexity of running all of that, as you mentioned, multiple policies, multiple products, potential contradictions, there is so the average enterprise is looking at this and say, we can't continue like that every time we need something, we throw in something. So SASE is an attempt to rationalize the stack. So, okay, can we re-architect the environment so it's simpler, so it's more flexible, it's agile, it's kind of available, so IT doesn't have to think about all these scenarios from an availability standpoint, patching, maintenance, policies. How can we radically simplify things? And I think that's the benefit at the end of the road to SASE, is that you get a rationalized IT stack that is ready for this cloud era, mobile era, and basically kind of can grow with you moving forward.
Couldn't agree more that simplification is something that IT shops need desperately, and often the way I have to phrase that to folks to understand is, leadership folks, is that time is the scarcest resource. Human time is the scarcest resource in any IT shop, not money, not compute capacity or anything else. It's human attention. So in that kind of an economy, simplification has dramatic value. So simplification, bringing all that policy together into one place. We see this as critical to just addressing the moment, being able to keep up. What about looking forward? Is that essential if folks really want to succeed in the kinds of transformative technology deployments that they're engaged in now, what people call digital transformation?
So I think that this agility and adaptability, it's the legacy that started with AWS. And basically this notion that you can get in a self-service fashion, an agile, kind of a quick server up and running at any scope, anywhere in the world, very, very effective. So this legacy is now moving down in other parts of IT, like networking security. In Cato, our slogan is ready for whatever's next. And if you think about it, let's take a look at the pandemic. We're still in it. Hopefully we're exiting it. I think that the challenge there was that one day everybody were in the office. The other day everybody was at home. The ability of IT organization to respond to this change because of the rigidity and the fixed way the networks were built was limited. You have VPN servers designed to serve 10% of the organization at a given point in time. Suddenly they have to serve 100%. So when you look at the cloud-first architecture that is scalable, it's elastic, it's available everywhere. One of the benefits of SASE, they were not designed with pandemic in mind, was that the capabilities follow the user. Wherever they go, the capabilities go with them. So if you're on a SASE platform, the day the pandemic hit, you were basically able to extend your network and security capabilities, policies, enforcement, optimizations to the people that went home. This is something that's essential. So I would say that SASE is future-proofing the investment. The cloud-based delivery allow you to introduce massive amount of capabilities very quickly. Okay, so you need to deploy a patch because there's a vulnerability. You do it once, it kind of deploys in the entire cloud. Don't have to patch 1 million appliances. New feature, the same thing. And this is kind of what the cloud delivery means. And to me, that's why it's worth getting into these kind of projects, is this ability to be agile towards the future.
And it's that submerged integration of deep automation in the network that I think really brings value to the IT staff when an SD-WAN type solution is deployed, and seeing it extend into the security space. We've done research, we've seen how having centralized management of distributed firewalls is a huge improvement in security for an organization, not just in leveraging a limited number of IT staff. So bringing that same level of deep and essentially hidden automation, people don't have to force it to happen, it is of huge value to enterprises and makes IT more agile, as you say, makes it better able to meet new business conditions, new business opportunities as well.
Exactly. I think that's the automation concept is obviously extremely critical. And the way I think about it is we want to take work off the IT plate. And there is so many things that IT doesn't have to think about when a cloud service needs to deliver. So, is it available? Is it resilient? Is it up and running? How is it being monitored? There is this, instead of running your own data centers today, many organizations run it in AWS because they don't have to think about all these things. They have other things they need to think about, but at least they eliminate some of the hassle of running, keeping the lights on type thing. And SASE is about that. It's basically somebody else keeping the lights on, and you can focus on your policies and risks and business specific issues.
We always used to talk about server huggers in the early stages of the transition, first to virtualization, then to cloud, and firewall huggers are still very much a thing. So this long run up via the cloud adoption is helping folks realize they don't have to have their hands on an actual firewall or secure web gateway in order to get the kind of security that they're looking for. Exactly. And in fact, they can get the security they're looking for more easily if they let go. So it's easy to see in this context from the things we've been saying about automation, about policy consistency, why IT folks will be so happy with a SASE type architecture, why risk management folks should be happy with it, because it brings consistency, it brings uniformity. What about anyone else? Why would users or anybody else be excited about an organization switching to SASE? What's in it for the users? What's in it for the customers?
Right. So obviously there is the cost aspect of things, and again, convergence. What it does, it basically kind of reduces the cost associated with, instead of buying 7 different products, you buy one. There's a lot of efficiencies and economies of scale essentially for the vendor. So it can deliver a capability that would otherwise be packaged by somebody else. So we see a lot in our business. We do a lot of technology elimination. We eliminate firewalls, WAN optimizers, obviously MPLS. So all of these things kind of come together, and the overall output for the customer is cost reduction. So the finance people should be happy in terms of that. In terms of end users, the greatest thing about IT is when you don't feel it, you don't know it's there. But I think the fact that they can very easily continue to do their work efficiently, productively, anywhere they are, in a secure way, that's a value for the end users as well. So I think overall, the business stakeholders, if you kind of look at it from the pure business side, if the business needs something done, they need to open up a new location in Singapore where the business was operating in the US. The whole notion of getting into Singapore, getting connectivity there, getting security there in the pre-SASE days means co-locations, hosting, appliances. There's a whole, so the result is 2-3 months lead time. With a SASE, you can switch it on with an internet link. It can even be a 4G link or a 5G if we get to it. And that's it. And the branch office is up and running, connecting to the SASE cloud, getting optimization, getting security, being able to access private applications in the data center, in the cloud. This instant response for IT is great for IT's reputation in the business, great for the business when they try to get something done. So I think that's kind of the benefits all around.
It's always great for IT when IT is not a roadblock in any way, or not even a slowing element in the deployment of a new branch or a new location. It's always great when IT is an accelerant, and great for IT and great for the business. I couldn't agree more on that score. We've had a question come in from the audience, and let me throw it your way first. Does SASE need to have a CASB, or can it work independently?
The answer is it can work independently, which means that SASE is a cloud service, CASB is a cloud service. There is a lot of this notion of cloud, cloud services in the business, right? The same way you have in Office 365, Salesforce, a Box, these are cloud services that work in tandem in the business. The general direction is for SASE to accommodate the CASB functionalities. Exactly, we talked about convergence of physical appliances. For example, I'm eliminating my firewall box and I'm having firewall in the cloud. I can also converge a standalone CASB into a SASE platform and then have CASB capabilities in the SASE platform. And this is what K2 is doing. So both scenarios can work. It can be either converged into SASE, not the third-party product, but the capabilities that SASE represent, or SASE can coexist with your CASB if you have it right now, and it can just work together.
We do see, and I think this is a place where the pandemic year has made a difference, we do see CASB increasingly being an on-ramp to SASE as opposed to secondary functionality. As you were speaking to earlier, people were driven to make these kinds of changes as they had to accommodate more people working with their sanctioned cloud solutions from their home offices and didn't have a VPN to do it. So excellent. Yeah, let me see. You've touched on a really interesting point there. A lot of times, a comprehensive solution like SASE, when a single vendor deploys a solution that stretches across the whole architectural concept, it's often rigid. if you want to use SASE, you have to use all of their components to make it happen. You're saying, at least with respect to CASB, this is not the case for you guys. Is SASE inherently flexible? What makes a SASE implementation flexible and agile for the enterprise instead of rigid and potentially a roadblock for cost or feature loss or something?
So SASE can enter basically in any one of kind of different ways, right? So what you see here is a global backbone. It's our global backbone. Each one of these green dots is a place where we can deliver the full set of SASE capabilities in every place in the world in a consistent way. So it doesn't matter if you're a user or if you're a branch or if you're a data center, anywhere in the world, exactly the same set of capabilities. It doesn't mean that you actually have to use this entire service from day one. So for example, you can take 10 locations in a particular region, connect them to the SASE cloud, and then have them connect to the data center, and that's it. The rest of your network remains as is. Can be on MPLS, can be on some other solutions. The same with users. You can take a group of users in one place or in multiple places, connect them to the SASE cloud, have them get the service. So the SASE can be deployed for a subset of users, a subset of locations, or subset of functionalities while coexisting with the rest of the stack. I can tell you that in general, what happens in these deployments is once customers understand the zero-touch provisioning aspect of SASE, everything is instant, everything works immediately out of the box. It's just there is so little configuration that actually need to be done at the fundamental level, right, beyond your own policies. Then they can continuously roll out more. They can add more users, more locations, more capabilities. And this is kind of the evolution. The more you consolidate into this platform, the more cost you wring out. The more solutions will be eliminated, the more complexity will be reduced, but it's really up to the customer. And some of our customers are doing it gradually, some of them are doing it wholesale. This is really a customer decision.
So we've touched several times on how things are maybe different in this past year. Let's face it full on and ask, let me ask you, how the pandemic has accelerated SASE adoption.
So first of all, obviously because the SASE platform in general and Cato SASE in particular supports users and user remote access as an inherent architectural element. This has been in the product from day one, but it was typically an auxiliary element to an otherwise a very branch-centric WAN transformation. We went 500%. So we went 5x from the beginning of the pandemic to about middle of the pandemic. It's kind of because everybody wants it, just got it.
Right.
We went 5x on the users. So it's just the usage of remote access on our cloud went up significantly. And now we're seeing the remote access component becoming more strategic in all customer decisions, right? So, and that's actually very important. If you think about a standalone SD-WAN, it has simply no bearing on remote access. I mean, fundamentally, it's branch technology. There's no remote access plane. So, you know, you can talk about putting boxes in people's homes. It's possible, but it's very complicated logistically and management and support. There's all kind of reasons why not do it. We have a client for that, and obviously we have the box if you want to put it in somebody's home. So remote access really accelerated that. So you can say that SASE, the remote access aspect of SASE became a driver. But as I noted in the previous question, once you get with remote access and you understand what this can do, there's nothing that stops you from starting adding branches or saying, okay, this actually can do more than just handle my remote users. Maybe I can get them into my locations and offices, etc. And we're seeing some of that kind of trickling into that side as well. So I think SASE and remote access really were designed to work together very well, and the pandemic basically accelerated that entry point into IT.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, it looks like our poll agrees as well. 57% of the folks responding in the poll said the WAN transformation on their minds is enabling secure remote access for everyone. We did next generation networks research just about a year ago, right before pandemic lockdowns started to happen and people were forced to work from home. Even then, so right at 2 weeks before the lockdown started, what we saw was that only about 38% of the traffic on businesses' WANs, wide area networks, was that archetypical branch to data center to branch to branch traffic, the inside to inside stuff. The rest of it, more than 62%, was touching the outside, either inside headed out, outside headed in, or starting outside and finishing outside. That was already 17, almost 18% of traffic at that time. So we figure that in the pandemic, it's easily 40 to 50%. And yes, that traffic shift was already happening before COVID came. It's been accelerated by COVID, and tools like this, CASB, SASE broadly, are essential to being ready for this kind of thing when it happens. It's pandemic insurance for the next pandemic, which unfortunately we all have to think is going to happen at some point. It reminds me, the first time I had this conversation was back in the early 2000s, around the bird flu, and the need to provision for work from home even then. So if that's how the pandemic has accelerated SASE, what are some of the other IT trends that are driving the rise of SASE, the kinds of things leading to that shrinking of inside to inside traffic and the need for other kinds of architectures?
So obviously, cloud migration is a huge thing, right? So essentially, again, if everything was in the data center, all the traffic was destined to the data center, all the networks are built, architected to optimize, maximize that data center traffic, this hub and spoke design. And suddenly we're going hybrid. So maybe we adopt Office 365, or we take our own applications and we move them gradually from the data center, the physical data center, we move them to some cloud data center like AWS VPCs or Azure VNets. And now we're living in a world where we have multiple destinations. We have internet destinations, we have hybrid cloud environments, which is just a fancy name for having both private data center applications as well as cloud data center. And all of this suddenly changes the traffic patterns in the network. What about optimizing the traffic in all of these directions? What about securing the traffic in all of these directions? What about worrying about the sources where it's going to come from? That's the rise in remote access. This is the major trends. Okay, so cloud migration, remote access, and the fact that the tools were built initially to address the different network, a different scenario. This is where a big box in the data center to secure everything was the right approach, and now it's not. So I think these are the underlying trends. And as I said, the response was a bit it's chaotic. It's just a requirement, a solution, requirement, solution. SASE is trying to kind of reorganize the IT essentially towards the next decade, where we need a rational stack. And we need to get there because it's not sustainable otherwise.
In my mind, it's equivalent in some ways in scope and in importance, potential impact for the enterprise to the big protocol shakeout that happened back in pretty much the 90s, when all the different low-level transports and high-level transports consolidated down to Ethernet and IP for the vast majority of solutions, traffic, and people and organizations. And that made a lot of technology simplifications possible and made it possible for IT to be much more strategic in how it solved problems, because it wasn't juggling things at that level anymore. I think SASE can be similarly important in the long-term perspective.
I agree. And that's exactly it.
To what you've said for other trends driving it, let me just throw in two more. One being the rise of mobile workers and the need to provide them with secure access wherever they happen to be. Kind of dovetails with work from home, but it was rising before work from home became so enormous, and will continue to rise even after work from home. I won't say returns to previous levels, because it won't, but settles down a little bit from its peak here. The second one is the enormous, almost meteoric rise of collaboration tools, which again, much driven by the pandemic, but already happening very quickly before the pandemic hit. And that driving both more and bigger traffic streams from location to location, from person to person. That streaming high-def video is really different from an instant message or an email message in terms of the burden it puts on the network and the expectation of performance. So both of those are also driving that SD-WAN thread that's pushing people towards SASE.
I think it's actually a very good point. One of the misconceptions we're seeing in the market is the security bias that SASE has. But the use case you just outlined require very deep expertise in networking. It's the ability to handle packets in a very specific way, to recover from problems in a very specific way. And if you look at most of the new entrants into the market, there are security legacy companies that are buying their way into or trying to build themselves SD-WAN capabilities. Our experience, and we are actually also, our founders and even myself, are more security people than networking people. You have to learn. I mean, there is experience that you have to go through to really protect customers' voice, video, UCAS, remote desktops, all kind of latency sensitive applications that every packet counts. This is not firewall tradition. It's just not what a firewall was built to do. Never worried about these things. And it's kind of interesting that SASE is forcing, because the use cases are so broad, it's forcing the need to learn and deploy capabilities that can work all the way from network optimization to very strong security protection and everything in between. Okay.
Is that security piece that's so prominently on people's minds right now, is that going to become the foundational driver going forward? There's a lot of talk now about zero trust and zero trust for these multi-clouds that people are building for their organizations, including their own internal data center, private cloud implementations. Is that central going forward, and how does SASE make that happen?
So zero trust obviously is a security concept, and it fundamentally means that you have to understand the identity of every resource accessing the network, and then validate or authenticate that identity in a kind of a continuous way or risk-adjusted way, etc. So the trust that disappeared, the zero trust, applies to the fact that if I'm on the network physically, I have an IP address on the network, doesn't mean that I'm a trusted entity. I have to be authenticated as if I wasn't on the network. So SASE is a great broker. It's a great place because it's the central interconnect that everybody connects to. It's a great place to enforce authentication and then continuously assess risk for that user as they continue to operate. And in that sense, SASE really is fundamental or foundational to zero trust. Zero trust itself is a security element, and The first thing is that, in my view, first of all, you have to connect. You mentioned, I think, the term on-ramps. SD-WAN is an on-ramp to the branch. The Zero Trust client is the on-ramp for user into it. There is cloud kind of interconnects that connects cloud data centers into the SASE fabric. So all these on-ramps are very, very fundamental. You really have to do them very well, because if they don't work well, nothing matters. And Zero Trust is just naturally, you're able to add Zero Trust naturally into the SASE cloud as yet another security capability. So I would say the future belongs to security in the sense that once you have the SASE architecture in place, the on-ramps are in place, the security capabilities that you have are in the cloud. Now it's a race to add more and more security capabilities to the SASE cloud, because it's a natural place to deliver all of them using the same framework. So I think security, the evolution of SASE will be all about security features once you get the groundwork set with the right architecture in place to do that.
The way we think about that shift that's happening is that the WAN and security are having to shift their focus in this network mindset from the location to the user, and to some extent the endpoint, not as a surrogate to the user, but as a context for the user. And as you say, it's critical in the context of Zero Trust to pay attention to the user, and not just who they were or were able to verify that they were when they got on the network, but also what they do once they get there. Because the assumption should never be, once you're in and everything's great. The assumption should always be, you got in, but that doesn't mean that, you know, your machine isn't compromised and wasn't just waiting for the chance to have you inside this network, or you know, you yourself are not going to become a bad actor and start trying to do things you're not supposed to do. So the network should always be providing feedback to that Zero Trust context, and SASE, because it's a melding of network and security concepts and components, is perfectly positioned to do that. So that kind of leads us naturally into the idea that a SASE environment improves threat protection for businesses. Can you speak to how having a unified environment in that sense really does decrease threat for the enterprise business?
So I think that because SASE is a cloud-first architecture, and we put everything in the cloud, then we are able to provide consistent threat prevention everywhere globally, down to a single device. Okay, if you think about how IT used to think about threat prevention, we need strong firewalls, big firewalls, maybe most of the features in our data centers. As we go into smaller and smaller locations, we can justify the expensive boxes. We'll put smaller boxes, or we will buy less features, or we will activate less features because we can't manage them when the numbers start getting bigger. And obviously, when I look at a user, well, that user, I don't want to backroll them back to the data center. So either they get nothing, or I have to deploy yet another solution. So it's not going to be such a pain for them to get security on the road. So I'm going to use some kind of secure web gateway in the cloud or something. So SASE creates this. Imagine that a single user on a mobile device can get the same protection: firewalling, next-gen anti-malware, IPS, DLP, CASB, all of these things working together to protect, secure, and optimize the traffic from that single user. This is a breakthrough, and it affects complexity, it affects cost, it affects deployment scenarios. That's the great thing about SASE, is this: you get the same protection, very deep protection, to everybody everywhere. And I think that's a real benefit of this architecture.
Yes, agreed. And that ability to bring together the network perspective and the security policy environment makes it easier, or at least more straightforward, to spot things that are spanning different channels and trying to get access into your network illicitly that way. If you're bringing together the policy environments for secure web access, watching for things coming in that way, for the firewall, watching for things coming in that way, and for user access and various policies on device health, or where people are allowed to get access to a specific system from and where they're not. All those things together help filter out those persistent and distributed channel attacks that are becoming more prevalent and thornier.
Okay.
So obviously, we see lots of benefits for this kind of environment. You want to sell this environment and see lots of benefits for people adopting it. What should businesses be paying attention to before they implement SASE? What are the considerations?
I think they need to start from their business requirements. So obviously they have strategic projects like moving ERP systems to the cloud. We see it as a very common driver. UCaaS, they want to deploy voice essentially in the cloud. Office 365 migration, globalization. This is the business driver. And then they can look at the technology stack that they need to deliver, right? They need to optimize, they need to secure, they need to accelerate. I think that so that's one way to think about it. What do I need? And then what do I have that I can potentially kind of consolidate? My budget is derived from all the technologies I'm currently using. SASE is a replacement market. And more than anything else, that's actually what makes it very compelling. It's replacing MPLS technologies, firewalls, secure web gateways, WAN optimizers. These are all budgets. You may have a net saving on the whole thing as opposed to net cost. So I think understanding your strategic project, where the capabilities, what capabilities you need to deploy, and when, does the network look like post SASE, typically a very big change in the underlay, last mile provisioning. There's a lot of these considerations. And then you basically go and look for the best architecture to deliver those things in this converged way. So you end up with a platform that is really better than where you started from, right? And not just kind of call it lipstick on a pig kind of a thing where basically somebody's trying to package it for you and deliver it, but still all the underlying complexity still there. That's
agreed. And we would just throw into that pot for consideration before implementing SASE issues of sequencing and timing for migration to the various capacities. If your primary entry point, your primary on-ramp for SASE itself is CASB, deploying that, a lot of folks, greenfield, no big deal. But if you want to then pull in secure web gateway function, you've got to factor in how long it's going to take you to make that transition for your team and for your users, what kinds of contracts you've got in place around what you're using currently, or depreciation schedules, whatever your considerations are for that. Similarly, if it's about the SD-WAN function as the primary on-ramp, what are your current WAN contracts and what are the timelines you have for transitioning existing sites versus bringing up new sites? And that actually is a bridge to the last thing I wanted to touch on. When we did the poll, about 28% of folks said that their big consideration for WAN transformations is reducing what they're spending on MPLS. And that certainly lines up with our research in the past around SD-WAN, lines up with your discussion of SD-WAN earlier. What kinds of cost savings can businesses expect to realize if they deploy SASE, understanding that that extends beyond the SD-WAN aspects of it? So what can people expect?
What we're seeing in our customer base is savings between about 30% to sometimes north of 50%. And here is an example. This is like a snapshot in time of a customer network. This is coming actually from our user interface. And you can see here the convergence in action. So this is all the global locations that customer has. You can see cloud icons on the right, which indicates the Azure instances in this case. You can see a little icon with people, that's the remote access. So essentially, when the customer looked at all of these dimensions, and they said, okay, in the middle ring, I have all the security that I used to have in edge appliances. This is all now centralized. I have SD-WAN functionality built in, a global way to connect any location globally, all the way from China, obviously, to the US. When I look at this, at the list of items, this itemized list of all the technologies that I had to use to deliver the set of capabilities you see on the left, they're looking at roughly 30 to 50% savings at any given point in time. So I can tell you that I've been with Cato for now almost 6 years. We probably were never asked to produce an ROI document for a customer in this entire journey. They don't need to. They know exactly what they spend, they know what we ask, and they can do the math. So I think this is a very strong indication that this convergence is just radically reducing cost, both tangible cost, hard cost, as well as soft cost in people time, attention, errors, downtime. This is all factored in. So
I think there's a lot to be said for bringing all those costs into the foreground, making them easily visible. And also, we still see a lot of interest amongst our clients, at least, in shifting from a capital intensive model for delivering services to an OpEx intensive model for doing so, pushing that into the security space especially, and the WAN edge is a significant change for the enterprise, for the business, and often, as you say, can go right along with significant savings. On the WAN side, we're seeing those decrease some over time as the MPLS vendors have to respond to the price pressure SD-WAN is brought to bear, but they're still there, they're still very real. They vary a lot by geography, and the further you are from a major city, the bigger they get. But as you're also saying, that's only one piece of the puzzle, and consolidating all those security functions into a single place represents another opportunity for savings for a lot of businesses.
That's correct. Yeah.
Let me see. I think that's where we're going to draw this to a close. Any closing thoughts before I encourage people to join us next time?
So first of all, thanks for having the opportunity to discuss this. This is a topic that is close to our hearts. We obviously built the SASE architecture before the term was invented. That was the vision of Cato. So if you visit catonetworks.com/SASE, you kind of see the whole story there of how we think about SASE, and we can the way we can help customers try it, feel it, and really see what it feels like to work with this converged, simple, streamlined environment. And this is a journey. So we are working very hard with people like yourself and the people at BrightTalk to educate the market, to understand what the benefits are. And we think that kind of history is on our side in that sense. So thank you for hosting me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to everybody else who has joined us for this, which is just the first episode in the Turbocharged by SASE Network Transformation in 2021 series. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for sharing your information via the polling, and Yishay for sharing your perspectives and your insights. Thank you. Everybody who's in attendance, please make sure and pop over to the attachments section of the user interface here and register to join us for episode 2, which will be using SASE for Zero Trust Network Access, the future of post-COVID-19 IT architecture. And looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks.
Thank you.